It's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's hear from TDS sufferer and quisling Adam Kinzinger, who spent 4 years crying about January 6th. Remember him? Well, he's now calling for Americans to take to the streets because they are in unbelievably uncharted territory. I don't know about you, but this all sounds a little bit insurrection-y to me.
Listen, we are in unbelievably uncharted territory here. And, we're approaching the point where, honestly, it's like we're all going to have to take to the streets or something.
Now to the Democrats' latest star, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She wants you to know that she is a serious lawmaker and she's a black woman.
I want y'all to know that every day that I walk in those halls, regardless of whatever rhetoric they put out about me, I am a very serious lawmaker. At the same time, if you try me, you will find out. I just want to be clear about that because I am truly a black woman at the same time.
Why is she telling us she's a black woman? We can see that. And why should that be contrasted against her being a serious lawmaker? These Democrats are so race-obsessed that sometimes they inadvertently are racist against themselves. Now to the woman many Democrats want to see as a presidential candidate, Michelle Obama. Here she is on her woefully low-rating podcast, talking about how hard married life is. Well, it is when you're married to Barack.
I think sometimes people who date don't realize that, in long-term relationships, you're gonna have deep dips. And you're going to have
a bad year.
You're going to have I tell people, and folks think that this is harsh, it's like you're going to have a bad decade.
Yeah.
I've been married to my husband for 30 plus years. The truth is, if you add it all up, even the year, if the odds were you're going to be married to your partner for 50 years and 10 of those years could be bad,
You'd sign up for it.
You'd sign up for it.
No thanks, Michelle. A miserable decade. Think I'll give that a pass. It's not the 1820s anymore. Women can be single nowadays. Let's hear from a couple of mask-wearing trans activists now. One of them is hailing Satan, while the other is talking about love and tolerance and solidarity. What? She's calling others crazy, bless. And the lefties are turning on each other. It seems even members of the LGBTQIA++ community fail to be sufficiently sensitive to pronoun preferences.
It is one thing to get misgendered by straight cis people, but it is another thing going into a queer space and getting nothing but misgendered there. That pisses me off so bad. I was at the gay bar last night. The gay bar is always the scene of the crime, okay? And I'm in line waiting for the bathroom, and there's stalls and there's urinals, right? And anybody that's using the urinal, I just let them go in front of me, and then I'm waiting for a stall. And some guy comes out, and he says something about the urinals, and he was like, "Oh, you're waiting for the stall?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "And that is a woman's right." What gave him the audacity to say that to me?
Here is a mother who claims that her child told her at the age of 18 months that they're trans. They've been trans since birth.
What age do you think most trans kids determine that they're trans?
Violet told us when she was 1.5. She's been telling us since she could speak. So she knew since birth.
And while we're on this issue, there's been more fallout from the UK Supreme Court decision last week, the unanimous landmark ruling that defines what a woman is. And guess what? It's an adult female, as we've always told you. It's a biological female. They have to be born, they can't be made. But not everyone is taking the decision well.
You've probably heard about this Supreme Court's ruling on the definition of the word woman. This will have some real serious implications. It will have some consequences. But I want to tell you one thing. They can make their laws. They can specify their definitions. They can take away my rights. But there's one thing that they'll never be able to take from me. And that's who I am. I'm a trans woman and I'm proud, and they'll never be able to take that from me.
And this next leftist feminist claims that this victory for women's rights is in fact a victory for the patriarchy. This old fool seems to think that women who are well built or who have short hair will be mistaken for men and will have to prove their womanhood. Seriously, that's the argument. Have a listen.
Please stop talking about this court decision that was made yesterday about the definition of what a woman is and framing it within a victory for a feminist context. It is not. Those people are like leftovers from the 1980s. They are exclusionary feminists. They are nothing to do with the modern feminist movement. And this is absolutely not a victory for women's rights. You realise what you have done. You know, we now all have to prove that we are women in order to get the services that we feel most comfortable in. Technically, I will have to prove that I'm a woman to be able to be searched by a female officer if I'm arrested by the police. I mean, you could say, well, you look like a woman and you sound like a woman, but so do a lot of my trans female friends. And what about my friends who have got polycystic ovary syndrome and are a little bit hairy about the face? What about my friends who are quite tall and well built with square jaws and look a little bit masculine? What about them? This is not a victory for women's rights. This is a victory for the patriarchy.
Yep, that's the argument. That's how desperate and illogical they're getting. That's what they think is a winning argument in this debate. Now let's go to the US and a heartbreaking case of senseless violence and a broken justice system. Carmelo Anthony stabbed to death a 17-year-old boy, Austin Metcalf, at a track meet in Frisco, Texas. Austin died in his twin brother's arms. Afterwards, we had the vile spectacle of people defending this teen killer. People raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for him. He walked free from jail on April 14 after his bond was reduced from $1 million to $250,000. And since then, his family and his representatives have played the victim. Here, a representative, Dominique Alexander, attacks Austin Metcalf's father, the victim's father, Jeff, for attending a press conference held by the Anthony family.
That was disrespectful and just shows you all the character. Who was not invited, he knows that it's inappropriate to be near this family, but he did it. And so I say to people, actions speak louder than words.
Yes, the grieving father being there is apparently a disrespect to the dignity of his son. The father was asked to leave, and guess what? He left. He didn't stab anyone because he was asked to leave. Now, this press conference, we also heard from the accused's mother.
The lies and false accusations that have been said about us, especially over the past week, has been overwhelming.
And then we were back to Dominique Alexander, the family's representative, blaming the school for wanting to expel this thug. And then he unbelievably blamed the weather for what happened that day.
Frisco ISD has notified of their intent to expel Carmelo Anthony from school 1 month before his high school graduation. That just shows me that Frisco ISD is trying to push off the blame. And what I have not heard the media say, as many media outlets have asked us what went on, I'm trying to find how many of y'all have asked the superintendent or one single board of trustee, why didn't you cancel or postpone? With weather in that magnitude, you couldn't have a track meet in rain or thunderstorm or clouds. Y'all are the media. Ask your journalists, your weather journalists, how the weather was that day and that time. Y'all do that research.
Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, this case is incredible. If the races were reversed here, I think the media coverage would be dramatically different. And the manner in which Carmelo Anthony's family is playing the victim, raising money, holding press conferences, I mean, that's quite incredible as well.
It really is. I mean, it's so brazen, this whole flipping of victimhood, and the culture has just turned into this victimhood Olympics, and now you're seeing it in its worst possible place when you've got this just senseless, depraved heinous act, murder, that was conducted, and even that's being wrapped up along racial lines, which has nothing to do with it. The spokesperson, Dominique Alexander, that they hired, he himself has a criminal record. He's a convicted felon from 2011. He's out there with some nerve saying the things that he said, kicking out the father, and then the mother wrapping all of that up. Again, no awareness at all or even acknowledgement of what the actual victim's family is going through. It's beyond me. I thought most things wouldn't shock me anymore, but this one shocks me too.
It really just shows a sickness that exists in America right now with those who are just race obsessed and they want to look at this through a racial filter, and they just cannot cope with the fact that the victim here happened to be white, the aggressor happened to be black. That shouldn't be the issue. It should be the fact there is a teenage boy who's dead, who died in his twin brother's arms, and he's forgotten whilst the victim is being lionised and hundreds of thousands of dollars being raised for him. Now to more leftist lawlessness, and one of Tim Walz's state employees stands accused of causing around $20,000 in damage, vandalising Teslas. Here he is, filmed, looks like he's keying cars there. There is ample footage of these alleged incidents. Dylan Brian Adams is a fiscal policy analyst, a Minnesota state employee. He's been arrested kosher, and this comes just a few weeks after we heard Tim Walz, the failed vice presidential candidate, mocking Tesla's share price falling, attacking Elon Musk repeatedly. And to see these acts across the country, people going around vandalising cars belonging to individuals, I'm not advocating for attacking dealerships, but when you're actually attacking the personal property of someone, I mean, really, again, we talked about a sickness that exists. This is another example of it.
It is another example, and I think the meta point is that the consequences are just too soft and too weak in culture in general. Decriminalization, selective outrage, letting certain people off the hook based on where they fall. In this case, this policy analyst did get arrested, as you mentioned, so there are some consequences which are necessary to have deterrence. But unless and until we see that much more strongly, unfortunately, I think these acts are only going to continue because people, either they can skirt some sort of punishment, or even further, they're actually glorified by a portion of the left, and so they want to do these kinds of things.
Absolutely. We've had a lot of Democrat politicians refusing to disavow this sort of violence, and the left has become increasingly activist and violent in its behaviour. We saw that throughout the BLM riots, around $2 billion worth of damage, very few consequences and arrests. You compare that to, say, what happened on January 6th and people being in solitary confinement for months. How do you see this issue and how it separates America? Because when people talk about two Americas, I think this is really central to that issue, where people have lost faith in those institutions. They've lost faith in the fact that they're going to have equal justice under the law.
I know, it really does show that to America, that divorce symbolically that's happening gets much more hitting you in your home, on the streets, when it comes down to crime and the actual criminal justice system being fair or not. And when we look at all these cases, whether it's Kyle Rittenhouse or Daniel Penny and all of those, you could see how, had they been tried somewhere else, Kyle Rittenhouse certainly, in a different jury, in a different state, the outcome would have been different. Daniel Penny squeaked by through a hair's breadth. That is very, very scary to a lot of people, that if something, God forbid, were to happen and you find yourself in that situation, if you live in the wrong jury pool, you can't trust the system anymore.
Now, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has said that she's going to be treating these cases like domestic terrorism. They're politically motivated acts of violence, so they fit the definition of terrorism. Will that dissuade some of these people from acting out? Because I think part of the reason why we've seen this increase in violence is because they watch those BLM riots, they watch those Antifa riots, and really not much happened to those who were guilty of causing enormous damage.
Yeah, and that's the learned behavior. I do think if you make one or two examples of people within the law, it often, and history shows us, it will serve as a deterrent. Whether you look at illegal immigration, different issue, but that sending plane loads of people over to El Salvador is a deterrent for people who don't want to be caught in the net of this administration. And then domestically, it's a bit trickier in terms of which statutes can apply and how far you can push them. But to the extent of the law, the fullest extent of the law, if you prosecute 1, 2, 3 of these folks in the harshest terms that are legally available to you, I do think it'll serve as a deterrent.
I think that's part of the reason we're seeing the illegal immigration crisis be resolved, because why would you come across if you're going to be sent back, if you're going to be locked up, and if you're a criminal, you could be sent to a mega prison in El Salvador. Now the media is reporting that the Trump administration is looking to replace Defence Secretary Peter Hegseth, with reports claiming that he shared classified information in a group chat with his wife, brother and lawyer. Hegseth was asked about this. This was his response.
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. And on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Now, the leftist media, including NPR, are saying that the Trump administration is looking to replace Pete Hegseth, but the president is backing his man. This is what he had to say earlier.
Ask the Houthis how much dysfunction there is. There's none. Pete's doing a great job. Everybody's happy with him. We have the highest recruitment numbers I think we've had in 28 years. No, he's doing a great job. It's just fake news. They just bring up stories. I guess it sounds like disgruntled employees. You know, he was put there to get rid of a lot of bad people, and that's what he's doing. So you don't always have friends when you do that.
You sack a lot of people, you create a lot of disgruntled anonymous leakers. He has a point there. It doesn't look like Pete Hegseth's job is in jeopardy there.
At least from that statement, it does not. Look, Trump is not afraid to fire people. He has done that. He's famous for that. You're fired. People called it chaos. He's also not afraid to stick by people in the wake of media onslaught or opposition onslaught like this. The example that comes to mind for me is Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh. In his confirmation hearing, he was under enormous pressure from everybody and their mother to pull that nomination. He did not. And I think he is tuned into what he would call witch hunts against people that are in there trying to enact his agenda and fighting back against protected interests that want them gone. And I'm sure that's playing a part. And until he sees otherwise, I think he will back his man, as you said.
I think it almost makes him increase his support for them, because he's faced that himself. He sees how unfair the media has been to him. And when the media piles on an individual, I think he gives them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett, maybe there should have been a bit more pressure to get rid of her, because that seems to be one of his bigger mistakes. He mentioned the recruitment numbers there. Just before you go, we are seeing record numbers wanting to join the military, record numbers wanting to join the FBI. There does seem to be a reinvigoration of those institutions under the Trump presidency.
Which is huge, and that is ultimately the metric that matters to Trump. He is there to do a job. Recruitment was a big problem with the military, from DEI and firing people for not getting vaccinated and all those things that they did. People didn't feel inspired to serve, and this is meant to be the most lethal fighting force in the history of the world. So it is up. Pete Hegseth definitely is doing a good job in that regard, and surely Trump is taking a look at that in the context of everything else, and he's going to always prioritize that, because that's ultimately what it's about for him.